Derek clutched his chest, staggering forward. His breath came out in shallow gasps. The pain shot through his body like a knife. He reached out, grabbing the edge of a shelf to steady himself. No one noticed. The store was busy. Cashiers scanned items. Workers stocked shelves. Customers moved through the aisles. But not a single person looked his way. Derek's heart pounded harder. He stumbled again, this time knocking over a display of canned goods. The cans clattered to the floor, echoing through the store. Still, no one helped. They stared for a second, then went back to what they were doing. Derek's vision blurred. His legs wobbled beneath him. This wasn't part of the plan. He thought someone would have helped by now. He thought his own employees would have cared, but they were leaving him there alone, except for one voice. "Are you okay?" Derek turned. A single worker stood nearby, the only person who had stopped. He didn't know it yet, but in a few minutes this worker's life was about to change forever. It had started 2 days earlier. Derek hadn't stepped inside one of his own stores in over a year. He owned over 50 locations across the state, each one built from the ground up. But as the company grew, Derek became just a name on the paperwork. Managers handled the day-to-day operations. Employees came and went. On paper, everything seemed fine, but lately, something had felt off. He had received letters, anonymous messages from customers, and even a few former employees. They all said the same thing: "Your stores have changed. No one cares about customers anymore. People who need help are being ignored." Derek couldn't ignore the letters any longer. He needed to know the truth. But if he walked in as the CEO, everyone would be on their best behavior. So he came up with a plan. He would go undercover. Not as a mystery shopper, not as a customer, but as a man in need. A man who desperately needed help. The morning of the test, Derek dressed in plain clothes, a worn jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed shoes. He left his watch and wallet at home. No phone. No signs of who he really was. By the time he walked into the store, he looked like just another struggling man. The kind of person most people would walk right past. And that's exactly what happened. For the first 30 minutes, Derek wandered the aisles. Not a single employee greeted him. He tried asking for help a few times, but the workers barely glanced at him before mumbling something and walking away. It was like he was invisible. The reports had been right. His company, the one he built with his own hands, was turning into just another heartless business. But the test wasn't over yet. Derek moved toward the middle of the store, clutching his chest. Then he collapsed against the shelves. He made sure his breathing was loud, his hands shaking. People saw him. He knew they saw him. But one by one, they all turned away. Derek's heart pounded, this time not from the act, from disappointment. Minutes passed. No one helped. No one even asked if he was okay. He was ready to give up, ready to walk out and fire the entire staff, until he heard that voice. "Are you okay, sir?" Derek's head turned slowly. A young woman stood a few feet away, clutching a clipboard. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure what to do, but she had stopped, and that already made her different. "Do you need help?" she asked again, stepping closer. Derek's voice shook as he played the role. I think something's wrong." The woman's eyes widened. Without hesitation, she pulled out her radio. "I need a first aid kit at aisle 6 now." Derek's chest tightened, not from the fake pain, but from hope. This one employee, just one, was willing to care when no one else did. And she had no idea that the man she was helping was about to change her entire life. Some people think small acts of kindness don't matter, but sometimes those small moments can change everything. If you're the kind of person who believes in kindness, drop a like on this video. Derek felt a firm but steady hand on his shoulder. "Sir, I need you to stay with me, okay?" The young woman knelt beside him, her voice calm but urgent. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look around, waiting for someone else to step in. She had taken charge. Derek blinked up at her, still playing the part. His breaths came fast, his body trembling. Would she panic? Would she give up like the others, or was she different? Can you tell me your name? She asked. Derek let his voice come out weak. Daniel, it was the first fake name that came to mind. She nodded. Okay, Daniel. I need you to take slow, deep breaths. Try to stay calm. Derek could feel the shift around him. Other employees watched from a distance, whispering. Some customers glanced over but kept moving, pretending not to see. Still, no one else stepped forward, just her. Help is on the way, okay? She said. Derek studied her face. She was young, early 20s maybe. Dark curls framed her face, and a small name tag on her uniform read Emily. She had no idea who she was really talking to. And that made her actions even more genuine. Derek wasn't the CEO to her. He wasn't a wealthy businessman. He was just a man who needed help, and she had answered the call. Emily looked up, frustration flashing in her eyes. Where's the first aid kit? She called toward the nearest worker. A stock boy shrugged. I think it's in the back. He didn't move, neither did anyone else. Emily's jaw tightened. Go get it. The stock boy flinched and hurried off. Derek almost smiled. She wasn't just helping, she was leading. And that was rare, especially here. A minute later, a manager finally appeared. Derek recognized him from the employee files. Kyle Spencer. Store manager for the last 3 years. The kind of person who made himself look busy but never actually got anything done. Kyle walked over, hands on his hips. What's going on? Emily shot him a look. A customer collapsed. We need to call for medical assistance. Kyle sighed, rubbing his temple. Let's not overreact, sir. Do you need an ambulance? He asked, barely glancing at Derek. Derek kept his breath shallow, his face strained. I don't know. Kyle rolled his eyes. Well, if he doesn't know, we shouldn't waste resources. Emily's nostrils flared. Waste resources? What if something's seriously wrong? Kyle crossed his arms. We can't just call 911 every time someone feels lightheaded. Emily stared at him in disbelief. Then, without another word, she pulled out her phone and dialed anyway. Derek's stomach tightened. This was it. This was the moment that separated real leaders from people just collecting a paycheck. She knew Kyle would be mad. She knew she might get in trouble, but she did it anyway. Because it was the right thing to do, and that was exactly the kind of person Derek had been hoping to find. Kyle snatched Emily's phone from her hand before she could hit call. Are you serious? He snapped. You don't make decisions like that without my approval. Emily yanked her phone back. Then maybe you should have made the right decision in the first place. Kyle's face darkened. You do not talk to me like that. You're on thin ice as it is. Emily's fists clenched. Derek could see it, the moment of realization. She wasn't just fighting for him. She was fighting against a system that had made ignoring people normal. A system that let managers like Kyle decide who mattered. She exhaled sharply. Fine, if you won't do the right thing, I will. She turned her attention back to Derek. Sir, I'm taking you outside to get some air. If you still don't feel well, I'm calling for help. Derek nodded weakly. Emily slipped an arm under his, helping him to his feet. Kyle shook his head. You're making a mistake, Emily. She ignored him, and just like that, Derek knew. She wasn't just an employee. She wasn't just kind. She had something special. And in a few hours, she was going to find out just how much that mattered. Outside, Emily helped Derek sit on a bench near the entrance. The cold air hit his face, making the act even more believable. She crouched beside him. Feeling any better, Derek inhaled deeply, letting the moment settle. Then he made his decision. It was time. I am now, he said. Emily smiled, relieved. Derek pulled back his hood, sat up straighter, and looked her directly in the eye. Emily, there's something you should know. Her brow furrowed. What? Derek extended a hand. My name is Daniel. My name is Derek Bennett. I own this store. Emily's breath caught. She stared at him, not moving. Her eyes flickered with confusion, then realization. Wait, what? Derek smiled. You passed the test. You were the only one who did. Emily's mind raced. The gasping man she had helped. The manager she had stood up to. It had all been a test. I don't understand, she whispered. Derek stood up, his strength fully back. I came here undercover to see how my employees treated people in need. And Emily. He met her gaze. You were the only one who showed real heart. She blinked, still trying to process. So, what does that mean? Derek smirked. It means everything is about to change. Emily had no idea what was coming next. But one thing was certain: by tomorrow, her life would never be the same. Emily sat frozen on the bench, staring at Derek. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. This man, the one she had just helped, the one she thought was in serious trouble, owned the entire company. The same company where she was just another employee. You own this store. She finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek nodded. Not just this one. 50 more just like it. Emily's stomach flipped. Everything from the past 30 minutes played in her head over and over again. The way the employees ignored him. The way Kyle, the manager, refused to help. And then the way she had acted. She had spoken up. She had pushed back. Had she just argued with the CEO? Had she just risked getting fired? Emily swallowed hard. Am I in trouble? She asked. Derek chuckled. Trouble, Emily? You're the only person in that store who did the right thing. Emily blinked. So, I'm not getting fired. Derek smiled. Not even close. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But then another thought hit her. What about Kyle? She asked. Derek's smile faded. Kyle is a problem. One that I plan to handle personally. Emily hesitated. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Derek shook his head. Emily, listen to me. That store wasn't just broken, it was failing. And it's because of people like him. Emily thought back to the moment Kyle took her phone. The way he refused to take responsibility. Derek was right. Kyle wasn't just bad at his job. He was the reason employees had stopped caring. And that was about to change. 30 minutes later, Derek and Emily walked back into the store. The moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Employees stopped what they were doing. Kyle, who had been laughing with another worker, froze mid-sentence. His face paled. He recognized Derek now, and from the way his hands clenched at his sides, he knew what was coming. Derek didn't waste time. Kyle, my office. Now, the store fell silent. Every employee knew what that meant. Kyle swallowed hard but nodded, walking stiffly toward the back. Derek turned to Emily. You too. Emily's chest tightened. This was it. She wasn't just watching things change. She was going to be a part of it, and she had no idea what Derek had planned next. The office door closed behind them. Kyle stood with his arms crossed, trying to look confident. But Derek could see it, the nervous flicker in his eyes. So, Kyle said, forcing a smirk, guess you're doing surprise visits now. Derek didn't smile. Kyle, sit down. Kyle hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he dropped into the chair across from Derek. Derek leaned forward, all business. I've been hearing complaints about this store for months. Employees quitting, customers being ignored, people being treated differently depending on how they look. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Sir, Derek held up a hand, cutting him off. I walked into this store today as a customer in need. And do you know what happened? Kyle said nothing. Your team ignored me. Silence. Derek's voice hardened. And you, my store manager, stood by and did nothing. Kyle's jaw clenched. I didn't know it was you. Derek narrowed his eyes. That's the problem. It shouldn't have mattered. You don't get to decide which customers deserve respect. Kyle gritted his teeth. Sir, this is a business, not a charity. Derek exhaled slowly. Then he nodded. You're right, it is a business, and businesses need strong leadership. He glanced at Emily. Which is why, as of right now, you're no longer the manager of this store. Kyle's face drained of color. Wait, what? Derek stood up. You're fired, Kyle, effective immediately. Kyle shot up from his chair. You can't just fire me. Derek's stare was cold. Watch me. Kyle's breathing was heavy, his fists clenched, but there was nothing he could do. He had made his choice the moment he decided to ignore the very values this company was built on. Derek turned to Emily. And you, Emily flinched. Me. Derek smiled. You're the new store manager. Emily's eyes widened. Wait, what? Derek nodded. You heard me. Effective immediately, you're in charge. Emily's mind spun. She had never been in charge of anything, and now she was running the whole store. Sir, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Derek smirked. I do. You proved it the second you stepped up while everyone else looked away. Emily looked down at her hands. A day ago she had been just another employee following orders, keeping her head down. Now, she had a chance to change everything. She swallowed hard and nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Derek grinned. I knew you would. Kyle let out a bitter laugh. You think this place is gonna run better with her in charge? Derek's expression didn't change. I don't think I know. Kyle scoffed. You're making a mistake. Derek crossed his arms. No, the mistake was keeping you here this long. Kyle's face burned red, but he had no choice. He grabbed his things and stormed out. The moment the office door closed behind him, Derek turned back to Emily. Now, let's talk about how we're going to fix this store. Emily took a deep breath. She had been thrown into something huge, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. She was ready. Emily stood in the middle of the store, staring at the employees who were now under her leadership. Just yesterday she had been one of them. Now, she was their manager. Some looked relieved. Others looked skeptical. A few whispered to each other, their expressions doubtful. She could hear it in their voices. She's just a cashier. What does she know about running a store? She won't last a week. Emily felt the pressure. She hadn't asked for this job. But Derek had chosen her, and she wasn't about to let him or herself down. Derek leaned against the counter, watching as Emily took a deep breath and turned to the team. All right, listen up. Things are changing. Starting now. The employees shifted uncomfortably. They had heard this before. Every time a new manager came in, they made promises about how things would be different. But in the end, nothing ever really changed. Emily could see it on their faces. They didn't believe her. She had to prove it. First things first, she continued. Schedules will be posted a week in advance. No more last-minute changes. That got their attention. A few employees exchanged glances. Second, breaks will be given on time. No more skipping because we're too busy. Now they were really listening. Emily pressed on. And last thing, if a customer needs help, we help them. No exceptions. Silence. Then finally someone spoke. It was Lewis, one of the stock workers. And what if the customer is just being difficult? Emily met his gaze. Then we handle it. Professionally, but no one gets ignored. Lewis nodded slowly, considering. Emily exhaled. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Derek watched from a distance, impressed. Emily didn't hesitate. She wasn't begging for their respect. She was earning it. He walked over and clapped a hand on her shoulder. Good start, but now comes the hard part. Emily sighed. I figured. Derek smirked. Think you're up for it? Emily didn't even blink. Yes, Derek grinned. Then let's get to work. The first challenge, fixing the store's reputation. Derek pulled up the customer complaint records for the past 6 months. The list was long. Missed orders, rude employees, customers ignored at the register. It was worse than even he had imagined. Emily sat beside him, reading through the complaints. Her stomach twisted. How did it get this bad? She muttered. Derek sighed. It starts at the top. When management stops caring, employees stop caring, and then customers stop coming back. Emily shook her head. Not anymore. She flipped to a blank page in her notebook and started writing. Derek raised an eyebrow. What's that? A list of everything we're going to fix. Derek smiled. I like the way you think. That afternoon, Emily made her first real decision as manager. She walked straight to the front of the store, grabbed the microphone for the intercom and pressed the button. "Attention team. Starting now, we greet every customer who walks through that door. No exceptions." Employees looked up in surprise. A few rolled their eyes. Lewis smirked. "Guess we better start smiling, huh?" he joked. Emily grinned. "Yes, you better." And to everyone's surprise, it worked. As soon as customers started receiving friendly greetings, the energy shifted. People noticed. Some even commented about how much more welcoming the store felt. For the first time in a long time, the employees felt like their work mattered. Even Lewis, the biggest skeptic, admitted it. "All right, I'll admit it," he said later that day. "It's kinda nice when customers smile back." Emily laughed. Progress, but not everyone was on board. Two employees, Mark and Jenna, refused to follow the new rules. They ignored customers. They still slacked off during shifts. They even started spreading rumors that Emily was just a temporary fix. "Derek will bring in a real manager soon," Jenna whispered to another worker. "She's just here for show." Emily heard every word. And she let it slide at first. But when she caught Mark rudely brushing off an elderly customer, she had enough. She called both Mark and Jenna into the office. They strolled in, arms crossed, smug. "What's this about?" Mark asked. Emily folded her hands on the desk. "You tell me," Mark scoffed. "Look, just because you got lucky doesn't mean we have to listen to you." Jenna smirked. "Yeah, we've been here longer. We know how this place works." Emily stayed calm. She turned the computer screen toward them, showing their customer service reports. "You've both had multiple complaints in the last 3 months. Customers say you ignore them. Some even said you were rude." Mark shrugged. "People complain about everything." Emily sighed. "You're right, some do, but when the complaints all say the same thing, maybe it's not them. Maybe it's you." Jenna shifted uncomfortably. "So what, you're firing us?" Emily leaned back. "Not yet, but if you can't handle the new way we're running things, you can leave. No one's forcing you to stay." Silence. Mark and Jenna exchanged glances. Emily folded her arms. "So, what's it gonna be?" After a long pause, Mark exhaled. "Fine, we'll do it your way." Emily nodded. "Good choice." As they left the office, Derek, who had been listening outside, stepped in. "That was impressive," he said. Emily let out a breath. "I thought they were gonna quit." Derek smirked. "Then you handled it perfectly." Emily smiled. She had won the first real battle, but she knew this was only the beginning. Emily stood in the back office, staring at the latest sales reports. She had expected improvement, but this was unbelievable. Sales were up 15% in just 1 week. Customer complaints had plummeted. Employee performance, the best it had been in months. Emily had taken over the store less than 10 days ago, and already the results were clear. She exhaled, closing the folder. This was working, but she also knew the hardest part was still ahead, because not everyone wanted to see this store succeed. And one person was about to make things a lot harder. It started with a missing deposit. That morning, Emily got a call from corporate finance. "Emily, we're missing a cash deposit from your store." She frowned. "Missing?" "Yes, the money from 2 nights ago never made it to the bank." Emily's stomach dropped. Every night, the store's deposit was placed in a locked safe before being picked up by a security service. If the money never made it to the bank, that meant someone stole it. Emily clenched her jaw. "How much is missing?" $3,500. She gripped the desk. That was a huge amount, and if corporate thought she was responsible, her time as manager would be over before it even started. Emily inhaled sharply. "I'll find out what happened." She hung up, her heart pounding. This wasn't just about the money, it was about trust. Someone in this store had betrayed it. And Emily was going to find out who. She started with the security footage. Derek stood beside her as they watched the recordings from 2 nights ago. The cameras showed exactly what was supposed to happen. At 10:15 p.m., Lewis placed the deposit bag into the safe and locked it. At 10:30 p.m., the security service arrived to pick it up, but when they opened the safe, the money was already gone. Emily rewound the footage, watching again. The safe was locked. There was only one way the money could have disappeared. Someone had taken it before the security service arrived, and the only people who had access, managers. Emily's stomach twisted. That narrowed it down to 3 people: herself, the assistant manager Jenna, and Kyle. Emily's eyes narrowed. Kyle had been fired the same day the money went missing. Had he taken the deposit as revenge? Derek crossed his arms. I think we know who's behind this. Emily nodded slowly. But I need proof, and if she was right. Kyle wasn't just out of a job. He was about to be in serious trouble. Emily spent the next hour digging through records. Every deposit had a paper trail, and when she pulled the log from that night, she found something interesting. Kyle's name was listed as the one who had counted the deposit, but there was no record of him putting it in the safe. Emily's hands tightened on the report. He had faked the entry. Then he walked out that night with $3,500 in cash. Derek looked over her shoulder, reading the report. This is enough proof. Emily exhaled. What do we do now? Derek's jaw clenched. We make a call. 2 hours later, Kyle strolled into the store like he still owned the place. Emily and Derek stood near the entrance, waiting. Kyle smirked. Well, didn't think I'd be back so soon, did you? Derek's face was stone cold. Cut the act, Kyle. We know what you did. Kyle's smirk faltered. What are you talking about? Emily held up the security report. The deposit. The missing $3,500. You were the last one to touch it. Kyle's face twitched, but he didn't break. You can't prove anything. Derek crossed his arms. Actually, we can. Security footage shows you logging the deposit. But it was never placed in the safe. Kyle swallowed. For the first time, real panic flashed in his eyes. Emily took a step closer. You stole from this store, Kyle, and now you have 2 choices. Silence. Kyle clenched his fists. What choices? Derek's voice was calm but firm. 1, return the money right now, and we call this a bad decision instead of a crime. Kyle's breathing was heavy. And the second, Emily didn't blink, we press charges. And trust me, corporate will take this all the way. Kyle's face turned red. For a moment he looked like he might deny everything. But then he broke. With a frustrated growl, he pulled out an envelope from his jacket and slammed it onto the counter. There's your stupid money. Emily grabbed it, checking inside. All of it was there. Derek nodded. You made the right choice, Kyle. Kyle scoffed. Whatever, this place is a joke anyway. He turned to leave, then paused. He looked Emily up and down, his lip curling. You really think you can run this place? Emily didn't flinch. I don't think. I know, Kyle laughed bitterly. We'll see how long that lasts. Then without another word, he stormed out. The moment the doors shut behind him, Emily let out a slow breath. Derek patted her shoulder. You handled that perfectly. Emily swallowed hard. I wasn't sure if he'd give the money back. Derek smirked. He knew he had no choice. And now he's out for good. Emily looked down at the envelope in her hands. She had protected the store. The employees, the customers. She had proved again that she was exactly where she belonged. Derek smiled. You just saved this store again, Emily. How does it feel? She looked up, her confidence stronger than ever, like I'm just getting started. And she was right, because the biggest test was still coming. Emily thought she had seen the worst of it, but she was wrong. The missing money had been recovered. Kyle was finally gone for good. And for the first time, the store was running better than ever. But just as things started to settle, a new problem arrived at the front doors. And this one could destroy everything she had built. It started with a visit from corporate. Emily was in the back office, going over inventory reports when the phone rang. Emily, you have a visitor, Lewis said through the intercom. Emily frowned. Who? Someone from corporate, he says it's important. Emily's stomach tightened. Derek hadn't mentioned a corporate visit. She wasn't expecting anyone. She took a deep breath and walked to the front of the store. Standing near the registers was a tall man in a gray suit flipping through a folder. The moment he saw her, he smiled. But something about that smile made Emily's gut twist. "You must be Emily," he said, extending a hand. She shook it, her grip firm. "That's me, and you are Andrew Foster, Regional Director." Emily's pulse picked up. Regional Director. That meant he was above Derek, which meant he had the power to undo everything. Emily led Andrew to the office, keeping her posture straight, her expression unreadable. He sat down across from her, setting his folder on the desk. "You've made quite an impression, Emily." She folded her hands. "I try my best." Andrew chuckled. "No, I mean it. Sales are up. Employee retention is improving. Even customer feedback is better. It's impressive." Emily nodded slowly. "But," Andrew sighed, "Derek likes to run things his way. He makes decisions without consulting corporate first. And this whole, you becoming manager overnight thing, that's not how we operate." Emily's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" Andrew leaned forward. "I'm saying corporate is reevaluating Derek's decision. And yours." Emily's hands tightened into fists. "You want to replace me?" Andrew smiled again, fake and cold. "We're considering other candidates, people with experience." Emily stayed calm. "I've been running this store for 2 weeks. And in that time I've done more for it than any manager in years. The numbers prove that." Andrew shrugged. "Numbers aren't everything. Corporate values leadership experience." Emily exhaled slowly. "So let me get this straight. You're not questioning my results. Just the fact that I don't have a fancy title to back them up." Andrew's silence said everything. Emily leaned forward. "If you're looking for someone to babysit a failing store and collect a paycheck, go ahead and replace me. But if you want this store to keep succeeding, you'll let me do my job." Andrew studied her. Then he chuckled. "I like you, Emily. You've got fire." He stood up. "But at the end of the day, this isn't your call." Emily clenched her jaw. "Whose call is it?" Andrew smirked. "Mine." And just like that, he walked out. Emily sat there, staring at the empty chair across from her. She had just been warned. And if she didn't act fast, everything she had worked for was about to be ripped away. Emily wasted no time. She grabbed her phone and called Derek. He picked up on the first ring. "Emily, what's wrong?" She didn't sugarcoat it. "Corporate is trying to replace me." Silence, then Derek's voice darkened. "Who?" "Andrew Foster." Derek muttered something under his breath. "I'll handle it." But Emily wasn't done. "No, I'll handle it." Derek paused. "Emily, this is my fight now." More silence. Then finally Derek sighed. "All right, what's your plan?" Emily already knew, because if corporate wanted to question her leadership, she was going to give them an answer they couldn't ignore. The next morning, Emily gathered the entire staff before opening. Employees stood in a circle, waiting. She took a deep breath and spoke. "Corporate is looking for an excuse to replace me." Whispers spread through the group. Lewis frowned. "Are you serious?" Emily nodded. "But we're not going to let that happen." The employees listened closely. Emily looked around at the team. "I need every single one of you on board. We prove, beyond any doubt, that this store is better with us running it. That means we go above and beyond. Every customer gets the best service. Every shift runs smoothly. We don't just meet expectations, we shatter them." She let the words settle. Then she finished. "We win this battle by being undeniable." For the first time since she took over, the employees didn't just hear her. They believed her. And they were ready. The next week was the busiest the store had ever been. Customers left 5-star reviews online. Sales hit an all-time high. Even corporate couldn't ignore the numbers. Then, just as Emily expected, Andrew came back. And this time, he wasn't smiling. Emily met him at the front. "Back so soon?" she said casually. Andrew didn't respond. Instead, he handed her a document. Emily unfolded it and scanned the words. Her pulse spiked. Corporate evaluation report. Her performance was being officially reviewed. She looked up at Andrew. So this is how it is. Andrew sighed. It's not personal, just business. Emily's jaw clenched. Then let's do business. She turned the document around and slid it right back to him. Come back in 1 week. If this store isn't the best in the district by then, I'll step down myself. Andrew raised an eyebrow. You really think you can pull that off? Emily smiled. I don't think I know. Andrew smirked. All right. 1 week. He turned and left. Louis walked over, eyes wide. Emily, what did you just do? Emily took a deep breath. I bet everything on myself, and she had 7 days to prove she was right. Emily stood at the front of the store, watching as the doors opened for the busiest week of her life. 1 week. That's all she had to prove she deserved to stay. If she failed, corporate would replace her. And everything she had built, the trust of her team, the culture she fought to fix, would be gone. Emily refused to let that happen. She had come too far. Now it was time to finish what she started. And when Andrew returned at the end of the week, he wasn't going to find a store that was barely surviving. He was going to find a store that was unstoppable. She started with the employees. Emily knew that for this store to succeed, everyone needed to be on the same page. So she gathered them before their shifts and spoke plainly. I won't lie to you. This week determines everything. If we don't prove we're the best, corporate replaces me. And I guarantee whoever they bring in next won't care about you like I do. The employees listened, their faces serious. Louis crossed his arms. So what do? Emily's eyes sharpened. We leave, no doubt. Every customer who walks through those doors gets an experience they won't forget. We run this place better than any store in the district. And when Andrew comes back, he won't have a single excuse to take this away from us. Jenna, who had once doubted Emily, nodded. I'm in. Louis smirked. Guess we better make history, huh? Emily smiled. Damn right we do. And just like that, the team was all in. Now all they had to do was win. The next morning, Emily arrived at the store 2 hours early. She wasn't just checking reports or making schedules. She was on the floor working. She stocked shelves. She wiped down counters. She helped prep everything so when the doors opened, the team could focus on one thing: customers. The energy in the store shifted immediately. The moment customers stepped inside, employees greeted them with enthusiasm. They didn't just point when people asked for something. They walked them to the aisle. At checkout, cashiers didn't just ring people up and send them on their way. They smiled. They talked. They made the experience feel different. Word spread fast. People who had stopped shopping here started coming back. Regulars who had been ignored before noticed the change. By the end of the day, the store had set a new sales record. And Emily, she was just getting started. By midweek, something happened that Emily never expected. A customer pulled her aside. An older woman, probably in her 70s, smiling warmly. You must be the new manager. Emily nodded. That's me. The woman chuckled. I don't know what you did, but this store hasn't felt this good in years. Emily felt a wave of pride. She hadn't just improved numbers. She had improved how people felt. And that was worth more than anything. But just as things were going perfectly, a disaster struck. It started when the store was at its busiest. Lines were long. Shelves were being emptied faster than employees could restock. And then the power went out. Registers went dark. The store was silent. Emily's heart pounded. Customers looked around in confusion. Some pulled out their phones, lighting up the aisles with flashlights. Louis ran up to her. Backup generator. Emily shook her head. Only for emergency lights. Not for registers. Louis's face paled. So, what do? Emily had seconds to decide. If they panicked, customers would leave. If they handled this wrong, the entire week's progress could be ruined. She took a deep breath and turned to the team. "We're switching to manual checkout." Employees blinked. "Wait, what?" Jenna asked. Emily grabbed a calculator and a notepad. "We're doing this old school. Write down every item, add the totals by hand. If customers don't have cash, we take down their info and let them come back to pay when the systems are up." Lewis's jaw dropped. "You think that'll work?" Emily smirked. "It's the only option we've got. Let's move." The employees snapped into action. Cashiers used handwritten receipts. Stock workers helped customers find what they needed in the dark. Emily personally walked to every frustrated customer and reassured them. "We're not shutting down, we're making this work." And against all odds, it did work. By the time power returned an hour later, only 5 customers had left. Everyone else, they stayed, not because they had to, but because they believed in this store again. And when the lights flickered back on, the employees cheered. Emily exhaled. They had survived, and now they were unstoppable. The final day arrived. Emily stood at the front doors waiting. At exactly noon, Andrew Foster walked in. His expression was unreadable as he scanned the store. Emily stayed calm. The numbers were in. Sales had hit a new all-time high. Customer feedback was at 98% positive, and employee satisfaction, the highest in the entire district. Andrew turned to Emily. "Impressive." Emily folded her arms. "Told you." Andrew sighed. "I'll admit, you exceeded expectations." He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a folder. Emily's pulse spiked. This was it, the final decision. He flipped open the folder. And then he smiled. "Corporate has decided to keep you as store manager." Emily's breath caught. She had won, but Andrew wasn't finished. "Not just that, we want you to train other managers across the district, to teach them what you did here." Emily's eyes widened. "Wait, you want me to train other stores?" Andrew nodded. "Derek was right about you. You're a leader, and we want more of that." Emily's heart pounded. She had started as just another employee. Now, she was about to change the company. She exhaled, steadying herself. Then she met Andrew's gaze and smiled. "I'm in." That night after the store closed, Derek called. "I heard the news." Emily chuckled. "You doubted me?" Derek laughed, "Not for a second." There was a pause, then Derek's voice softened. "You did something special, Emily. You didn't just save a store. You built something bigger." Emily felt that she had changed lives, and now she was about to change even more. "What's next?" she asked. Derek grinned. "Whatever you want." Emily smiled, staring out at the empty store, the place where it all started. She wasn't just a store manager anymore. She was a leader. And this was just the beginning.